Now, Rotimi Ogunyemi, managing partner, Bayo Ogunyemi and company from Nigerian law firm Odujiri and Adefulu, joins us to discuss how regulators can keep up with technological advancements. You are welcome.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, let's get into it. Now, you might not want to talk or so much elaborate about it because we know it's a pending legal suit, but then let's just look at it from all areas that we believe that we can exhaust it. Now, the Advertising Regulatory Council of Nigeria at some point in August was relatively quiet, but now it is voicing out and saying it will sue a Meta corporation. Why is it that they are coming out right now? Is it because they were not empowered as at then, or due to other circumstances?
Absolutely. Fantastic question. And thank you for that initial disclaimer. We all know the matter is sub judice, under judicial consideration, and therefore prohibited from public discussion. But like you said, there are matters arising that appeal to the public. So back to your question. So yes, why is the regulator coming out swinging now? It's obvious. Sometime in August this year, the act that recreated that regulatory body became law. And that act empowers the regulator to do a whole lot, including sanitizing the advertising space, including the digital advertising space. So clearly, that's that's what gives the regulator the right to come out at this time to take on Meta. So yes.
So now that Akon is suing Meta, what about other social media platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn who also display adverts on their platforms? Is there a possibility that they would also be facing a lawsuit?
Okay, another great question. So really, which takes me to the crux of the matter. At the heart of this lawsuit is really the question of governance, internet governance. And governance is basically who is in control, who has control, and in this case, who has control of the digital advertising space, particularly as it relates to the Nigerian space. But like we know, the online digital advertising industry is cross-border. It traverses countries, it traverses jurisdiction, and of course, it's driven by technology. So that question of control is particularly interesting, right? Because unlike other technologies that came before the web, it was easy to control because much of it was centralized. The web is pretty much decentralized. And so where the regulator, like in this case, says, well, we are suing because of exposure of unvetted adverts and leading to loss to the government. It spills over into taxation as well. So it's internet governance and it's internet taxation. So yes, Meta may be the first point of call because between Meta and Google, Alphabet, they are perhaps the biggest players in this online digital advertising space. There's no telling that other platforms will have a visitation from the regulator sometime soon, sooner than later, perhaps.
Let's quickly do a comparison with other countries in other continents without having to mention a particular one. How would you say or describe that they regulate or control in a way their advertising space to avoid infringement, allegations, counter allegations, and all this back and forth?
So, typically, if we look at other countries, and of course, not necessarily mentioning, the approach is mixed. It's a mixed regulatory approach. That means platforms are held to standards. So there's self-regulation, then there's central regulation, and then there's collaborative regulation. So, and the rationale is simple. Vetting or sanitizing digital advertisements on a platform as huge as Google or Meta, I mean, cannot really and truly, in all sense of possibility, be done by human agents alone. And so these platforms are held to certain standards, which they now deploy heavy technology, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to regulate the space, self-regulation. Then the central regulator comes in. And of course, because you can't just leave players to the field without rules, particularly because society benefits from the central regulator stepping in at some point, the central regulator then steps in to augment that approach of self-regulation. So that's the best practice outside Nigeria. And then even in Nigeria, particularly as it relates to the online space, and I made mention earlier that there are two issues here. It's governance, control, and it's taxation. So particularly as it relates to taxation, already the Finance Act makes provisions for taxation as it relates to non-resident companies anyway. So, but it's an evolving area and it's maturing, right? So I would just say that, yeah, maybe we need to keep watching the space and we need to keep advocating to ensure that Nigeria also approaches this as other nations or advanced nations are doing. Thank you very much.
Well, undoubtedly, this friction between the Nigerian government and Twitter has been on for a while back. You remember that at the time, the Nigerian government banned Twitter for some allegations that were tendered as at that time. But then some people are saying that this could be politically motivated because, of course, next year is election year for the country. Do you also see it in that perspective?
Okay, so my perspective, even if I say so myself, is a bit nuanced. Um, I do not subscribe to platforms having the kind of power that they have today, right? A Twitter or a Facebook or a Google having the kind of raw power they have today. No corporation should have that. I mean, pretty much Twitter is the public journalism space, and that's where journalism happens in the 21st century. So for one corporation in one boardroom to will they stick without more, I think that's a bit extreme, right? However, the balance is what I said early on, which is so that bit of self-regulation with central regulation, like in the Twitter case. Yes, at some point, government should step in. Particularly, we live in a world where the ills of society has crept into the online space, hate, division, and all kind of extreme behavior. And so I do not think I think that government's approach could have been more measured, better. But I believe that we are learning lessons as we evolve. So again, not swinging to any of the two extremes, not keeping power in the hands of large corporations alone, and at the same time, government not becoming high-handed. So that's my nuanced perspective on that.
Well, this actually paints a certain picture or gives a certain perspective to the ease of doing business that Nigeria seems to claim. But then that's going to be a topic for another day. Thank you so much, Rotimi, for dropping by.
It's my pleasure. Thank you too.